What would you do if the one person who made your life a living nightmare walked right up to you in the middle of a crowded shopping mall and grabbed your wrist like you belonged to him? That's exactly what happened to Sarah Adams. It was a regular Saturday afternoon at the 900 North Michigan shops in Chicago. One of those really fancy malls where people carry big bags from Bloomingdale's and Nordstrom, marble floors, expensive perfumes floating through the air. The whole thing, for Sarah, this wasn't just any Saturday. It had been exactly 8 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days since she filed the restraining order. 8 months since she changed her phone number. 8 months since she moved into a small apartment in Logan Square. 8 months since she finally started sleeping through the night without waking up in a cold sweat. She was doing really well. She had a new job as a junior architect at a small firm downtown, and today she was treating herself to a new handbag to celebrate landing her very first solo project. She stood outside the store window looking at a woven leather tote bag, holding her iced latte from Intelligentsia, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long, long time: peace. A quiet, fragile, beautiful little peace. And then she smelled it before she even heard his voice. That heavy, overpowering cologne smell hit her like a punch in the stomach. Her whole body went cold. You always did have expensive taste, Sarah. Too bad you could never afford it without my credit card. That voice. Low, smooth, dripping with meanness. She slowly turned her head, and there he was, standing there in a perfectly tailored Navy Tom Ford suit, looking like he just stepped off a magazine cover. Daniel Sterling, her ex-husband, the man who had spent 3 years slowly, carefully tearing her apart. First with his words, then with his hands. Daniel, she whispered, her voice shaking even though she was trying so hard to hold it together. What are you doing here? You're breaking the restraining order. Daniel smiled. That cold, fake razor, sharp smile that never ever reached his eyes. He took one step closer, getting right in her personal space. To anyone walking by, they just looked like a nice couple having a quiet conversation. That was Daniel's talent. He was really, really good at looking normal while doing terrible things. A piece of paper signed by a judge doesn't mean anything to me, darling, he said, his voice light and easy like he was talking about the weather. You really think a mall security guard is going to arrest the vice president of Sterling Holdings? My father pumped money into the DA campaign last year. I'll scream, she said, her chest tight. She looked around. There were people everywhere, but Daniel smoothly shifted his body, blocking her from view. He put his hand on the small of her back. It looked affectionate to strangers. It felt like a steel trap to her. You won't scream, he hissed through his teeth. You hate causing a scene. You've always been a timid little mouse, and honestly, I'm tired of this hide and seek game. You embarrassed me by leaving. You made me look bad. Let go of me. She choked out, trying to twist away. His grip got tighter. He pushed her backward slowly, almost gently, until her back hit the cold glass of the storefront. The cold seeped right through her silk blouse. Pure panic clawed at her throat. This could not be happening. Not here, not in the middle of a bright, busy, high-end mall in the middle of the day. You're coming with me, he muttered, leaning in close, his hot breath right against her ear. My car is in the underground garage. You're going to go back to the Gold Coast with me. You're going to pack up whatever cheap stuff you've bought yourself, and you're moving back into the penthouse. If you say no, I will destroy your little architectural firm by Monday morning. I will make sure you never work in this city again. Tears started spilling down her face. The horrible truth washed over her. There were dozens of people within 20 feet of them, but because Daniel was welled, rest and quiet, Nobody saw the violence hidden in his grip. He grabbed her left wrist, his fingers clamped down hard enough to grind her small bones together. She let out a sharp, breathless cry of pain. Her coffee slipped from her hand and splashed all over the shiny marble floor. "Walk right now. Move," he commanded, his eyes flashing with that dark, ugly rage she knew way too well. Now, 2 floors above them, standing at the glass balcony of Astor Hall, there was a man watching all of this. Marcus Cole was not a man who involved himself in other people's problems, not usually. While the newspapers and TV channels were always chasing noisy street gangs, Marcus operated somewhere else entirely. In the deep, quiet shadows behind Chicago's most powerful people, he owned shipping ports, real estate companies. Politicians, he had built himself into something the city had never quite seen before, a man of terrifying silence and total, absolute power. He was dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. His dark eyes were scanning the mall below while his right-hand man, Ray, talked to him about a problem at the docks. Marcus wasn't really listening. His sharp gaze had locked onto something on the 2nd floor, the spilled coffee. The beautiful woman with terror written all over her body, pinned against the glass. The man in the navy suit with his hand wrapped around her wrist like she was a piece of luggage. Marcus's face didn't move, not one muscle, a cold, unreadable stone, but something happened inside his chest. Something old and buried. Maybe it was the memory of his own mother, cowering under his father's shadow. A memory that had driven Marcus to make sure his father never hurt anyone again. Or maybe it was simply this: a man was hurting a woman. In his city, in his territory, and that was not something Marcus Cole allowed. "Hold that thought, Ray," Marcus murmured. His voice was low and quiet, just 4 words, but Ray immediately stopped talking mid-sentence. Ray followed Marcus's gaze down to the 2nd floor. "You want me to handle it, boss?" "No," Marcus said softly. "I need a walk." Marcus moved toward the escalators. The crowd parted for him, not because anyone told them to. They just did, naturally, instinctively. The way animals move when an apex predator walks through. He didn't rush. He walked with the slow, deliberate steps of someone who already knew exactly how this was going to end. Down on the 2nd floor, Daniel was yanking Sarah toward the elevators. She was stumbling. Her heels kept catching on the marble. Silent tears streaming down her face. "Daniel, please," she begged, her voice breaking into pieces. "You're hurting me. Shut up and walk." He snapped, yanking her arm so hard her shoulder popped. "Excuse me." The voice wasn't loud. It wasn't a shout, but it had a strange, heavy quality to it. Like the sound sucked all the air out of the surrounding corridor the moment it landed. Daniel stopped, turned around with a scowl on his face, annoyed at the interruption. Sarah looked up through her blurred, tear-filled vision at the man standing about 10 feet away. Marcus Cole, tall, broad-shouldered, radiating something that had no simple name, pure, quiet, immovable danger. His dark eyes were fixed completely on Daniel's hand, the hand that was wrapped around Sarah's wrist. "Can I help you?" Daniel sneered, looking Marcus up and down. He registered the expensive suit, but he completely missed the lethal stillness underneath it. "This is a private conversation. Back off." Marcus didn't blink. He didn't speak. Instead, he slowly raised his left hand, 3 heavy rings on his fingers, a thick platinum band on his thumb, a family crest ring on his index finger, a heavy, jagged black stone piece on his middle finger. Methodically, calmly, Marcus reached for the platinum thumb ring. Gripped it, pulled it off, clink. He dropped it into his left jacket pocket. Daniel frowned. His grip on Sarah loosened just a tiny bit. just from pure, confused bewilderment. Are you deaf? Daniel's voice went up a level. I said get lost. Marcus reached for the family crest ring, twisted it slowly over his knuckle, pulled it free, clink, into his pocket. What the hell is your problem? Daniel demanded, his voice rising even more. A flicker of real unease cracked right through that arrogant front of his. He took a step back, dragging Sarah with him. Marcus reached for the third ring, the heavy black stone piece, pulled it off, handed it, along with his watch, to Ray, who had silently appeared a few steps behind him. A man who wears rings into a fight. Marcus finally spoke, his voice dangerously smooth and quiet. Risks damaging his possessions, or worse, cutting the other man's skin so deeply that the blood becomes a biohazard. Daniel let out a nervous, shaky laugh. Do you have any idea who I am? I'm Daniel Sterling. You touch me, and I will sue you into the ground and then throw you in a jail cell. Let the girl go, Mr. Sterling, Marcus said, not a question, not a suggestion, an executioner's final warning. She's my wife, Daniel barked, his ego completely blinding his survival instincts. He yanked Sarah harder. She cried out in pain. She belongs to. Daniel never finished that sentence. He never even saw Marcus move. It was just a blur, dark fabric, terrifying kinetic motion. Marcus closed the 10-foot gap in a fraction of a second. His large hand clamped around Daniel's throat with the force of a hydraulic press, instantly cutting off his air. Daniel's hands flew up, clawing at Marcus's wrist. He instantly let go of Sarah. She stumbled backward, clutching her bruised arm. Gasping, eyes wide, completely in shock, Marcus lifted Daniel a full 2 inches off the marble floor. By his throat, Daniel's legs kicked in the air. His face turned a deep, blotchy red. His eyes bulged, filled with sudden, primal terror, staring into Marcus's eyes, eyes that were completely, utterly calm. You talk about jail cells and lawsuits, Marcus whispered, just soft enough so only the 3 of them could hear. But you are standing in my city, breathing my air, and touching a woman who explicitly asked you to stop. I do not care about your bank account. I do not care about your father. I do not care about your board of directors. If I ever see your face within 5 miles of her again, I will not use my hands. I will have my men find you, bind you up, and drop you into Lake Michigan while you are still breathing. He didn't raise his voice, not once, and that made it 1,000 times more terrifying than a scream ever could. With one flick of his wrist, Marcus threw Daniel backward. The ex-husband crashed into the heavy brass frame of the mall directory. He crumpled to the floor in a gasping, coughing heap. His hands clutched his own throat. His eyes stared up at Marcus. Pure, unadulterated horror. Marcus adjusted the cuffs of his shirt, calm, unhurried, like nothing had happened at all. He didn't spare Daniel another single glance. He turned and looked at Sarah, the cold, brutal edge of what he was. Vanished just like that, replaced by something careful, something gentle. He took one slow step toward her. Kept both hands visible, unthreatening. Are you injured? He asked, his deep voice wrapped around her like a warm, heavy blanket. Sarah was trembling from head to toe, her chest heaving. She looked at Daniel on the floor, coughing and gasping. Then back at Marcus. Her mind couldn't make sense of what had just happened. No, she stammered, holding her bruised wrist. Who are you? Marcus reached out. Ray handed him back his watch and rings. As he slid the heavy platinum ring back onto his thumb, he looked down at her. A very faint, almost invisible smile crossed his face. Someone who hates a bully, he replied. Come, let me buy you a new coffee. Yours seems to have met a tragic end. Sarah sat in a quiet corner booth of a fancy little coffee shop on the ground floor. Her fingers curled tight around the warm porcelain mug. Her mind was spinning. The adrenaline had crashed. Now she just felt hollow, exhausted, empty. Across the small table from her sat Marcus Cole. He hadn't said a word since they sat down. He was giving her space, letting her breathe, letting her come back to herself. He just sat there. This mountain of a man in an immaculate suit, sipping a black espresso, his presence was huge, overwhelming even. But it didn't suffocate her. Daniel's presence had always felt like a cage closing in. Marcus's felt like a fortress door swinging open. A few steps away, near the entrance of the cafe, Ray stood with his hands clasped in front of him. To most people passing by, he looked like a businessman waiting for a table. To Sarah, who had spent 3 years learning to read every subtle threat in a room, it was obvious he was standing guard. "Drink your tea, Sarah," Marcus finally murmured. His voice was low and easy. None of the sharp edges that usually came from powerful men. Chamomile helps with the nervous system after a shock. She blinked. Looked down at the amber liquid in her cup. "How do you know my name?" Marcus set his espresso cup down on the saucer with a quiet little clink. "Your ex-husband has a loud voice and a fragile ego. He used your name several times while trying to intimidate you. I simply paid attention. He's not just an ex-husband," Sarah whispered. Her voice trembled as Daniel's threats echoed back through her head. "He's Daniel Sterling. His family owns half the commercial real estate in the Loop. He wasn't making empty threats up there. If I don't go back to him, he is going to destroy my career. He'll bury my firm in legal trouble just to watch me drown. Daniel Sterling," Marcus repeated slowly, rolling the name around like something unpleasant. A dark, quiet amusement flickered in his eyes, a mid-level executive playing games with daddy's money. "In this city, that's usually enough," Sarah replied bitterly. She took a sip of the hot tea. Marcus leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. The sheer width of his shoulders seemed to block out the rest of the cafe behind him. "Chicago is a complex place, Sarah. There are men like Daniel who make a lot of noise and wave their checkbooks around. And then there are men who own the banks where those checkbooks were printed, men who don't need to raise their voices to change the shape of this city." Before she could figure out exactly what he meant by that, Ray walked over quietly, leaned down near Marcus's ear. "Boss, Sterling is outside. He flagged down 2 beat cops. He's trying to file an assault charge, saying you attacked him unprovoked." Sarah's breath caught. "Oh God, I need to go out there. I need to tell them what really happened." "Sit," Marcus said gently. Just one finger raised, he looked at Ray, his expression completely bored. "Call Chief Harrison. Tell him one of the Sterling boys is wasting police resources on a bruised ego. Have the officers cite him for disturbing the peace if he keeps causing a scene." Ray nodded once. Consider it done. He walked away, pulled a phone from his jacket. Sarah stared at Marcus, her jaw barely hanging open. "You're just going to call the chief of police?" she asked, her voice hushed. "Like ordering a pizza. I provide significant contributions to the police widows' pension fund," Marcus answered smoothly, picking up his espresso again. "Chief Harrison and I have a mutual understanding of how order should be maintained in my districts. Daniel Sterling having a public meltdown does not qualify as order." For the first time in over 3 years, a small, unfamiliar spark lit up inside Sarah's chest. It wasn't just relief, it was the intoxicating, almost dizzying realization that Daniel Sterling's power had a ceiling, and the man sitting across from her operated entirely above it. "Who exactly are you, Marcus?" she asked quietly, her architect's mind trying to understand the structure of the person in front of her. I am a businessman, Marcus said. His dark eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her pulse skip. And right now, my business is making sure you get home safely. I can take the train home, she said quickly, her guarded nature flaring up automatically. You've already done more than enough. You are not taking the train, Marcus stated flatly. Not while a volatile, embarrassed man with a bruised throat is roaming the city looking for a way to fix his pride. He stood up, buttoned his suit jacket. My driver is out front. We will take you home, and then we are going to make sure Mr. Sterling learns a very painful lesson about what a boundary actually means. Monday morning arrived like a storm that had been building all weekend, heavy, suffocating. Sarah stood in the break room of Harrison and Bennett Architects. Staring blankly at the coffee machine, the weekend had passed in a blur of hyper-vigilance. Marcus had driven her home in a car that was clearly bulletproof. He had walked her to her apartment door himself, and then he had left 2 of his men in a dark, unmarked SUV parked right across the street from her building. She had tried to send them away. They had politely told her they only answered to Mr. Cole, despite having her own personal shadow security detail. Sarah felt sick to her stomach because she knew Daniel. His ego was a fragile, dangerous thing. Marcus humiliating him in public wouldn't make Daniel back off. It would make him vindictive. Sarah, she turned. Arthur Bennett, the senior partner of the firm, was standing in the doorway. He looked pale. His tie was loose. He was holding a stack of legal documents. Her stomach dropped. Arthur, what's wrong? We need you in the main conference room right now, Arthur said. His voice was strained. He wouldn't make eye contact. A cold, heavy dread washed over her. She followed him down the glass-paneled hallway. As they got close to the conference room, she saw him through the glass, Daniel, sitting at the head of the long mahogany table. Flanked by 2 corporate lawyers in matching gray suits, he was wearing a pristine gray suit, a faint, dark bruise barely visible above his collar. When he saw Sarah walk in, a sickeningly triumphant smile spread across his face. Good morning, Sarah. I hope you had a restful weekend. Mine was very enlightening. Sarah crossed her arms. Her fingernails dug into her own skin to keep her hands from shaking. What are you doing here, Daniel? Arthur cleared his throat nervously. Stepped to the side. Sterling Holdings currently holds the development contracts for our 3 largest upcoming projects, he said quietly. The South Side revitalization, the lakefront condos, and the new corporate park. I am aware of our portfolio, Arthur, Sarah said, keeping her eyes locked on Daniel. What Arthur is struggling to say. Daniel interrupted smoothly, is that Sterling Holdings has introduced a new condition to our continued partnership, a morality clause. We simply cannot have a junior architect with a history of unstable, violent associations handling our multi-million-dollar properties. He leaned forward, steepled his fingers. In short, Sarah, you are a liability. If Arthur doesn't let you go today, effective immediately, Sterling Holdings will pull all 3 contracts. This firm will be bankrupt by Friday. The room went completely dead silent. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. This was it. He was doing exactly what he promised. He was burning down her sanctuary, her safe place, her new life. Just to force her back into his cage, she looked at Arthur, who looked utterly, completely defeated. He was a good man, but he had 20 employees to think about. He couldn't sacrifice his entire company for one junior architect. You're a monster, Sarah whispered, her voice cracking right down the middle. I'm a businessman, Daniel smiled. And then the heavy glass doors of the conference room swung open. Fascinating proposal, Mr. Sterling, but structurally unsound. The deep, resonant voice rolled off the glass walls like a thunderclap. Daniel spun around in his chair. The smug expression evaporated from his face instantly, replaced by a flash of raw, naked panic. Marcus Cole strode into the room. Today he wore a pitch-black three-piece suit, the kind that made him look less like a businessman and more like a king stepping onto a battlefield. Ray walked silently behind him, carrying a single leather briefcase. "You," Daniel stammered. He stood up so fast his chair hit the wall behind him. "What are you doing here? This is a private corporate meeting. Arthur, Cole Security." Arthur, however, was staring at Marcus with wide, terrified eyes. Mr. Cole, I wasn't expecting you. Security won't be necessary, Arthur," Marcus said smoothly. Completely ignoring Daniel, he walked straight toward Sarah. His dark eyes softened just a fraction as he took in her pale face. He placed a large, warm hand on her shoulder, a single, silent gesture. It said, "You are not alone." "Get your hands off my wife," Daniel shouted, his face flushing red. Marcus slowly turned his head to look at Daniel. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. "Ex-wife," Marcus corrected, his voice a quiet, deadly whisper. "And I strongly suggest you lower your voice, Daniel. You're giving me a headache. I am pulling those contracts right now," Daniel shouted, trying to take back control of the room. "You have no power here. This is corporate law, not whatever street-level garbage you operate in." Marcus offered a cold, predatory smile. He snapped his fingers. Ray stepped forward, opened the leather briefcase. He pulled out a thick stack of embossed financial documents, tossed them onto the mahogany table right in front of Daniel. "As of 8 o'clock this morning," Marcus began, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "Montgomery Holdings acquired the primary debt of Sterling Holdings from First Chicago Bank. It cost a significant amount of capital, but I consider it a worthy investment." Daniel stared at the papers, his jaw dropped. That's impossible. My father would never allow." "Your father," Marcus interrupted seamlessly, "is currently in a very uncomfortable meeting with federal auditors, prompted by an anonymous tip regarding offshore tax evasion. He is entirely occupied." Marcus took one slow step toward Daniel, forcing the younger man to shrink backward against the whiteboard. "I own your debt, Daniel," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a register that felt like a physical weight on the chest. "Which means I own your assets, which means I own the 3 development contracts you just tried to use as a weapon." Daniel's lawyers had already started quietly backing away toward the door. They recognized a slaughter when they saw one. Daniel was hyperventilating, his eyes darting frantically around the room. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, turning his attention to Arthur, "Montgomery Holdings is officially acquiring Harrison and Bennett. We will be injecting $50 million of capital into your firm, Arthur. The 3 Sterling projects will proceed, but under my banner, and Sarah Adams will be promoted to senior lead architect on all 3. Sarah gasped. Both hands flew to her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. Daniel looked completely and utterly destroyed. The arrogant, untouchable golden boy of Chicago real estate, dismantled in less than 3 minutes. He stared at Marcus, all the bravado shattered. "You can't do this," Daniel whispered, his voice pathetic. "Small, I just did," Marcus replied, cold, final. He turned his back on Daniel, like the man had stopped existing. "Ray, escort Mr. Sterling out of my building. If he ever steps foot on any property owned by Montgomery Holdings again, break both of his legs." Ray smiled, the wide, unsettling smile of a man who would genuinely enjoy the task. "With pleasure, boss. Let's go, Sterling." Ray grabbed Daniel by the back of his expensive collar and dragged him out of the conference room. Daniel protesting the whole way, the door clicked shut. Marcus turned back to Sarah. The hard, violent edges faded, leaving only the quiet, intense man who had bought her tea. "I believe," Marcus murmured, looking down at her with a warmth that made her heart trip over itself. You have some blueprints to review, lead architect. Silence, heavy and complete, settled over the glass-paneled conference room. Arthur gathered his things quickly and practically ran out the door, leaving Sarah entirely alone with the most powerful, most dangerous man in Chicago. Marcus slowly unbuttoned his suit jacket, sat down at the head of the table, the exact chair Daniel had just been sitting in. But where Daniel had looked like a child playing dress-up, Marcus looked like a king taking back a long, empty throne. He gestured to the chair beside him. Sit, Sarah. She walked over on numb legs, sank into the chair, stared at him, her mind trying to bridge the impossible gap between the man who had nearly crushed someone's windpipe on Saturday and the corporate titan who had just rearranged the financial landscape of a company before 9 in the morning on Monday. Why did you do this? She whispered, her voice barely crossing the table. You don't know me, Marcus. You saved my life at the mall. That was enough. Buying my firm, buying Sterling Holdings debt. This is a war. You started a corporate war for a stranger. Marcus leaned back. He pulled a sleek tablet from the briefcase Ray had left. I do not fight wars I haven't already won, Sarah, and you are under the mistaken impression that this was an act of charity. He tapped the screen a few times, slid the tablet across the polished table. Sarah looked down, her own blueprints, her private digital blueprints. Her master plan for the South Side Revitalization Project. The intricate, sweeping designs featuring cantilevered glass, sustainable green spaces, and bold structural aesthetics. How did you get these? She gasped. These are on my secure local drive. I have a very capable IT department, Marcus replied, without a hint of apology. On Saturday night, after I dropped you off, I had my team run a full background check on you and your ex-husband. I wanted to understand exactly what kind of man thought he could put his hands on someone in my city. Marcus rested his forearms on the table, leaned in close, the scent of sandalwood washed over her. During that search, we found something buried very deep. He continued, his voice dropping into a quiet, vibrating register. 3 years ago, Daniel Sterling filed a patent for a revolutionary eco-friendly structural support system. He used it to secure his position as vice president of his father's company. He won industry awards, made millions. Sarah felt the color drain completely from her face. Her chest tightened. The oldest, most painful wound of her entire marriage ripped right back open. My graduate thesis, she breathed, her eyes welling up. He stole it. He took my flash drives while I was sleeping, scrubbed my name off everything, and told me that if I ever tried to claim it, his father's lawyers would destroy my life. He said no one would ever believe a hysterical unknown student over the Sterling family. I believe you, Marcus said. Just those 3 words, with a certainty so absolute, so quiet, so total, that the dam she had spent years building around herself just broke. One single tear escaped, traced a hot path down her cheek. Marcus reached out, his thumb caught it gently. His touch shockingly tender, a complete, impossible contrast to the violence those same hands were capable of. I didn't buy this firm to save a woman in distress, Sarah, Marcus murmured, his eyes blazing with a fierce, quiet fire. I bought this firm because you are a generational talent, and your gift was being suffocated by a parasite. Montgomery Holdings needs the best minds in the world. You are going to build my new corporate headquarters on the riverfront. You are going to sign your name to the South Side Project, and you are going to watch me burn the Sterling legacy completely to ash. Over the next 3 weeks, Sarah learned exactly what it looks like when Marcus Cole promises to burn an empire. The anonymous tip he had mentioned, it wasn't just a tip. It was a heavily documented dossier compiled by Marcus's financial shell companies. hand-delivered to the SEC and the FBI. On a rainy Tuesday morning, federal agents raided Sterling Tower on Wacker Drive. Daniel's father was indicted on 22 counts of federal tax evasion, wire fraud, and racketeering. But Marcus saved the final, most personal blow specifically for Daniel, armed with the digital forensic evidence his team had pulled together. The district attorney formally charged Daniel Sterling with intellectual property theft and corporate fraud. Because Montgomery Holdings now owned the Sterling debt, Marcus legally seized all of Daniel's personal assets to cover the damages from the fraudulent patents. Daniel's penthouse on the Gold Coast repossessed his bank accounts, frozen his luxury cars. Towed away in the dead of night, in less than 1 month, the arrogant, abusive, untouchable heir of the Sterling name was reduced to sleeping on a friend's couch in the suburbs, wearing an ankle monitor, awaiting federal trial. Utterly and completely blacklisted from the city of Chicago, 6 months later, the grand ballroom of the Peninsula Hotel was glittering. Crystal chandeliers, camera flashes, the quiet buzz of Chicago's most powerful architects and builders. The annual Chicago Architectural Gala, the most prestigious event in the city, Sarah stood near the champagne fountain, looking like an entirely different person from the terrified woman who had been pinned against the glass of a storefront on a Saturday afternoon. She wore a stunning emerald green silk gown that draped perfectly over her frame. Over her arm hung the woven leather tote bag, a quiet, triumphant little gift from Marcus on the day she had officially signed the new blueprints. She wasn't hiding in the corners anymore. She was the center of gravity in the room earlier that evening. She had accepted the Vanguard Award for the South Side Revitalization Project, her name proudly etched into the crystal trophy. Her rightful legacy, finally, fully, completely restored, she took a sip of her champagne, and then she felt it. A warm, heavy hand settling confidently on the small of her back. She didn't flinch. She leaned into it. Marcus stood beside her in a bespoke midnight blue tuxedo, the 3 heavy rings on his left hand glinting under the chandelier light. He looked down at her, that usual mask of cold indifference gone, in its place a deep, quiet, fierce pride. "You look breathtaking, lead architect," Marcus murmured, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. Sarah smiled. She rested her head against his broad shoulder, feeling the solid, unmovable strength of the man who had torn down her nightmare, and handed her the tools to build her own empire. "Thank you," she whispered, looking out over the crowd of people who finally knew her name. For everything, Marcus pressed a soft kiss to her temple, his dark eyes scanning the room, forever the apex predator, guarding his territory. But when his gaze came back to her, it held nothing but devotion. "We haven't even broken ground yet, Sarah," Marcus promised, his voice a low, thrilling rumble. "This is just the foundation.